Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would talk about this little video and the subject that I found to be very particularly interesting. And I was actually going to do a multitude of videos kind of for this, and I'm not sure if this is going to be separate or what. We'll see what ends up happening. But of course, for those of you that have not heard in the most recent news, really actually about both of these fighters, Mr. Gervonta Davis, his next fight has been announced, I believe, in that of December. And Naoya Inoue, the Japanese monster, his next fight has also been announced in December. I believe that Inoue will be defending his 122-pound titles against that of the Australian fighter Sam Goodman. And Gervonta Davis will be fighting a 130-pound champion and that of Lamont Roach Jr. Now, in my personal view, I don't really find either of these fights to be A-grade level fighters that they're going to get in the ring with. But the very particularly interesting thing is that when I see the fan bases of both Gervonta Davis and Naoya Inoue, especially from a lot of these LDBC and new media channels, what I oftentimes notice is that they'll like to put one fighter much more ahead of the other fighter, at least in terms of resume. And just in my personal view, if you're asking me who has the better resume, I would probably have to go with Mr. Naoya Inoue just because not only is he a legitimate four-weight division champion, but on top of that, Naoya Inoue has probably the biggest win out of any of their careers. When you talk about Naoya Inoue, he has the victory over Stephen Coolboy Fulton. Remember that DontaesBoxingNation at one point in time had Fulton beating Naoya Inoue, and at one point in time he had Stephen Fulton as a top 10 pound-per-pound fighter. That's what he had him as. Okay? Excuse me. So Naoya Inoue being ranked above Gervonta Davis, you cannot necessarily have a problem with that on the pound-for-pound list in my personal view. But let me just state this, very quickly. Because I remember when Naoya Inoue was getting heavily criticized by a certain amount of the LDBC and new media channels for being ranked so high on the pound-for-pound list because they believed that his competition was not up to par. And personally, I did agree with that. Because I also did not know a whole lot of the fighters that he was fighting other than that of Nonito Donaire and some of the other guys. I mean, to be fair, I did know a certain amount of his opponents. I knew who Jamie McDonald was. I knew who Payano was. I knew who, Nonito Donaire was. And I knew Emmanuel Rodriguez. I knew all those guys. But it was just kind of hard to judge whether those guys were legitimate A-grade level fighters. And in my personal view, a lot of these LDBC and new media channels, they're trying to make it out to seem like Gervonta Davis, like, every fight that he's getting into is just this great level of competition. And when we really want to go there, when we really want to be logical and objective, there's no offense against Gervonta Davis, but Gervonta Davis probably has one of the weaker resumes out there, especially for a potential top 10 pound-per-pound fighter. And I just thought that it was very particularly interesting because, Dante and a lot of these guys, they always try to make it seem like Gervonta Davis, that he's fighting the toughest of competition and blah, blah, blah. And listen, I'm not going to go too much in on Gervonta Davis right now because it did appear like he finally tried to get in the ring with some elite level opponents like Vasily Lomachenko and Shakur Stevenson, but apparently they just did not come to fruition. But at the end of the day, hopefully Gervonta Davis is able to get some of the bigger fights, especially within the next couple of years. Because Gervonta Davis is not young anymore. Gervonta Davis is going to turn 30 years old this year. And I believe that Naoya Inoue is also going to turn 30 years old this year. But the difference between the two fighters is that Inoue has fought everybody that he's needed to, including some of the A-grade or low A-grade level fighters that you could maybe claim that he's beat. Certainly Stephen Fulton, maybe a Nonito Donaire if you want to claim that as A-, and maybe also a Luis Neri if you wanted to claim that as A- as well. That's up to you. And then, of course, if he's able to get in the ring with Junto Nakatani and Jesse Bam Bam Rodriguez and maybe some of the guys at 126, those would be some A-grade level wins as well. But the thing is with Gervonta Davis is that so far, other than maybe Ryan Garcia and Frank Martin, and I really don't even know how good Frank Martin actually is. We don't really know how many A-grade level fighters Gervonta Davis has been in the ring with. But the thing is that's just so interesting to me is that I remember when a lot of these LDBC and new media guys, they were claiming about how, in a way, how can you rank him within the top 5 pound per pound because we don't know a lot of the guys that he's fought. He's fighting weak level competition, right? But then how can you have Gervonta Davis within the top 5 pound per pound when you have certain fighters like Crawford and Usyk and Canelo and Inoue? I'm sorry, but you can't have Gervonta Davis above any single one of those fighters. You can't have him above any one of those fighters. You also, in my personal view, cannot have him above the winner of the Bivol versus Better Beef match. It's just not going to happen, at least not on my personal list. Now, everyone, of course, can rank their list however they want to, but I rank my list off an objective and a logical criteria. And resume and, the level of competition, in my personal view, is the most important feat. And I'm sorry, but no one cares that you defeated Hector Garcia and Isaac Pitbull Cruz and Rolly Romero and Mario Barrios. No one cares. Now, all those guys have been recent champions, but the reason why they've been recent champions is because, let's just be real here, Al Heyman has matched them up very, very well. It's not like they were champions when Gervonta Tank Davis really fought them. They were champions mainly, at least mainly, besides Hector Garcia, I believe. They were champions, afterwards, because Al Heyman matched them up very well, because he realized that Gervonta Tank Davis's resume was coming under fire a little bit, so he knew that putting Mario Barrios in a division where the titles were going to be vacated, as well as Isaac Pitbull Cruz and Rolly Romero, he knew that that was going to be the best thing to do. So all of them could potentially become champions, and he could say, see, we'll take a look. People say that Gervonta Tank Davis's resume, that it's so weak, but he defeated this champion, and this champion. Right, but the reason why Rolly Romero, Isaac Pitbull Cruz, and Mario Barrios, the reason why they really became champions in the first place is because all the titles were completely vacated within those divisions. They weren't really championship level fighters ever to begin with, but it just is what it is. And that's not me stating once again that Naoya Inoue is fighting A-grade level fighters every single fight either. But it's just very particularly interesting how so many people, how Dante and a lot of these guys, they love to bitch and moan about how Inoue was so quickly placed within the top 5 pound per pound. But you'll find that Gervonta Tank Davis pretty much off of fighting a lot of these bums, is no offense, but, other than Ryan Garcia and Frank Martin, who the fuck has he really beat? It just is what it is. But it's just very particularly interesting how all of a sudden Gervonta Tank Davis is so easily being ranked within the top 5 pound per pound. And just in my personal view, he cannot yet be within the top 5 pound per pound. And I said the same thing with Naoya Inoue before he defeated Stephon Fulton. A certain amount of you actually may remember that on my channel. There was one time where I claimed that Inoue was the most overrated fighter on the pound per pound list because in my view, he didn't have enough names on his resume. But when he defeated Stephon Fulton, I had to finally acquiesce and I had to finally agree that yes, he eventually was top 5 pound per pound, but he needed to get that win first. And it's the same thing with Gervonta Tank Davis. I'm sorry, but at the end of the day, when you talk about it, Gervonta has no debatable top 10 or top 20 pound per pound wins on his list at all. There's not one fighter on there that would have ever been on the top 10 to top 20 pound per pound level. Maybe Leo Santa Cruz at one point in time, maybe, but to be honest with you, that's a little bit of a stretch. It is what it is. Naoya Inoue, one thing I'll at least say about him is that he did defeat Stephon Coolboy Fulton, who would have been probably top 20 pound per pound at that particular time. And let's not forget, DontaesBoxingNation and a lot of these channels, they had Inoue, remember, losing to Stephon Fulton, and they had Fulton top 10 pound per pound. But now once again, they want to complain about Inoue sometimes being ranked number 1 pound per pound and all this other stuff, and it's completely disrespectful, blah, blah, blah. Right, well, if you're going to complain about that, here's my question. And you don't have to rank Inoue number 1 pound per pound. Right now, in my view, it's either Usyk or that of a Terrence Bud Crawford. But the thing is that if you're going to bitch, moan, and complain about Naoya Inoue being ranked so high on a list and apparently disrespecting other black fighters, where is this same narrative for Gervonta Tank Davis? Because who the fuck is this dude fighting? Like, no offense. But once again, I can name you several fighters on a pound per pound list right now that has better resumes than that of a Gervonta Tank Davis. Dimitri Bivol and Artur both have a better resume than Gervonta Tank Davis. Canelo Alvarez, even in some of his most recent fights, has a better resume than Gervonta Tank Davis. I mean, the two biggest wins in Gervonta Tank Davis's career, they've never even been champions in any particular division before. So, I mean, you tell me who has the better resume, even in recent terms. Alexander Usyk has the better resume than Gervonta Tank Davis. Terrence Crawford has the better resume than Gervonta Tank Davis. Naoya Inoue has the better resume than Gervonta Tank Davis. Devin Haney has the better resume than Gervonta Tank Davis. Teofimo Lopez has the better resume than Gervonta Tank Davis. Now, I would put Gervonta Tank Davis right now on the pound-per-pound list above at least some of those guys because of his most recent dominance and his wins over Ryan Garcia and Frank Martin. But how good are those guys really? We don't actually, we don't actually know. But anyways, DontaesBoxingNation is going to talk about it here. I just thought that it was very particularly interesting. Let's get straight into it.
DontaesBoxingNation, what's going on, guys? So have you guys noticed that when it comes to Naoya Inoue, fans don't even care who he fights? They don't care how big of a draw he is, how many tickets he sells. Surely he's big in Japan, but Japan...
Right, but let me also address this, because DontaesBoxingNation, and let's just be real, a lot of these LDBC and new media channels, they've been trying to do this shit where they've been trying to knock Canelo Alvarez off the mountaintop for a very long time now for whatever reason. Overall, whether it be his pound for pound status or also the quote unquote face of boxing. Let's also address that very quickly. Canelo Alvarez in his last pay-per-view buys against Munguia, at least the confirmed buys, they did 550,000. Gervonta Tank Davis, who was allegedly now the new king and the new face of boxing, and now they want to say, oh, well, the face of boxing is either Gervonta or Canelo Alvarez. No, it's still Canelo Alvarez. Because when you talk about the Ryan Garcia versus Gervonta Tank Davis fight, that was a fight that was supposed to do over 1 million pay-per-view buys. Once again, that was looked at as a generational build-up type of fight. That's what that was looked at as. All right. Of course, Gervonta was the A side, and he was probably the bigger star of the two, at least debatably. But Ryan Garcia, of course, brought his share to the table as well. That was a fight that was in the making for the past several years. So let's not compare that fight to a fight that was like, Crawford versus Madrimov or, Canelo versus that of Munguia or something like that. No, you can't compare it like that. That is a fight that is known pretty much once every decade. All right. So it is what it is. Anyways, but moving on once again. When you talk about it, Canelo apparently in his most recent fight did about 650,000 pay-per-view buys against that of Edgar Berlanga. And Gervonta Tank Davis had David Benavidez on the undercard. So at the end of the day, when it comes down to if Gervonta is supposed to be the quote-unquote main face of boxing, he was supposed to do at least 600,000 pay-per-view buys at a minimum. All right, it is what it is.
Man is the size of California. I mean, do you guys really think that if there was a black fighter from Ghana or Jamaica, and he was one of the best fighters in the world, but he always fights in his native country, and he's not even well known in America, do you think old media and the rest of these non-black fans would be defending him, saying, yeah, people don't really know him that well in America, but he's big in Jamaica, but he's big in Ghana? We know for a fact that if there was a black 122-pound fighter, not only would they not be defending him, but old media wouldn't even be talking about him. You see, Naoya Inoue is on what I call the hope list. He has his hope insurance, which means it covers anything that he does. He has full coverage.
I somewhat agree with you, Mr. DontaesBoxingNation. There are a lot of non-black fighters that will quote-unquote have hope insurance or some level of protection from that of quote-unquote old media or a lot of the boxing fans. But at the same time, Gervonta Tank Davis very clearly has full hope insurance from you and pretty much all the LDBC and new media because they realize the potential that Gervonta Tank Davis brings to the table, which is that not only could he be a huge star, but he's a guy that could have potential later on #1 pound for pound ability.
I mean, just look at his last 3 opponents. Now compare that to Gervonta Tank Davis's last 3 opponents. You can't show.
Now, what I will state is this. In my personal view, the last 3 opponents that Gervonta Tank Davis has fought has been better than that of Naoya Inoue. But the problem is, at least when you ask me personally, when it comes down to the thing is that, I also forgot about Marlon Tapales. Marlon Tapales also could debatably be about an A- level fighter for those weight classes. So actually, I would actually have to say that Marlon Tapales is better than Hector Garcia. Because you could debate that Marlon Tapales, at least for his weight classes, was maybe about an A- level fighter. I'm not really quite sure if you can state that about Hector Garcia. Now, Ryan Garcia and Frank Martin, once again, I give Gervonta Tank Davis full-on credit for those. I think that those are at least A- level wins. It's just hard to gauge because those guys have never really fought anyone else before. I mean, Ryan Garcia fought Devin Haney, but of course, the win was overturned as of recent. But, I still give him credit for that because, once again, in my personal view, Devin Haney was more than likely probably also on steroids with the SNAC program. But, that's a topic for another time. But, when it comes down to it, I do have to agree that, in a way overall, that more than likely that the opponents have been a bit better on Gervonta Tank Davis's resume. However, for the weight classes, you could debate that Marlon Tapales and Luis Neri, that they're at least A- level wins. You could debate that those are A- level wins. Now, I would say that Ryan Garcia and Frank Martin, that they're a little bit more talented than some of those guys. I would probably argue that, at least to a certain degree. But the thing is, at least that I'll say about Inoue, is that Luis Neri has been a multiple weight champion before, I believe. And when you also talk about Marlon Tapales, he had 2 of the belts there. One thing I do have to say about Ryan Garcia and also that of a Frank Martin, they've never held any belts.
Show me 5 comments on the internet where non-black boxing fans are criticizing Naoya Inoue for his level of opposition, saying that he's fighting against bums, he's cherry-picking, etc., etc. Can you imagine what old media and the rest...
What I'm also going to state is this, just in my personal view. This next fight against Lamont Rhodes Jr., I do not see this as an elite level fight. And it's also very particularly interesting because Gervonta Tank Davis is bringing him up a weight class. Are we going to hear Dante and Boxing Eagle and some of these guys claim like what they did with Canelo? Why is Gervonta Tank Davis bringing him up a weight class? I don't like how he's bringing him up a weight class. You know, overall, this guy only has 10 knockouts out of 30-something fights or 20-something fights. You know, why are you fighting this guy? Blah, blah, blah. We're not going to hear any of that from them. But once again, I don't blame Gervonta Tank Davis too much because he did at least try to get in the ring with some of the bigger name fighters this year. So I'm not going to judge him too much. You know, it's certainly better than what he's done in previous years. But, you know, at the end of the day, Gervonta, once again, he is going to have to get in the ring with some of these bigger names because it's no offense, but so far his career has been a little bit disappointing in my personal view, just at least in terms of the resume. I mean, the man is 30 years old. At the end of the day, when you talk about fighters like Usyk, Canelo, you know, Inoue, you know, even at this point, you know, all these other guys, you know, Crawford, they've accomplished more than what Gervonta Tank Davis has at this point in time in his career.
The boxing world would say if Gervonta Tank Davis announced that he was fighting against TJ Doheny next. Now imagine what fans would say if Naoya Inoue announced that he was fighting an undefeated Frank Martin next. The bar is set so low when it comes to non-black fighters. The truth is, Naoya Inoue, he could go for the rest of his career not fighting anyone. He can continue to fight the TJ Dohenys and the Paul Butlers, and old media, they will still defend him. Now, let me say this, though. I don't believe that Naoya Inoue is trying to go the Canelo Alvarez route. I do believe that Naoya Inoue, he's going to continue to challenge himself. He's just not fighting the best competition consistently the way Gervonta Tank Davis has been doing. If Gervonta...
Right, but come on, please give me a break. The thing is about Gervonta Tank Davis, fighting the best competition consistently, he's fighting these one-dimensional Latino dudes that pretty much can't fight in any other way and that are never going to be looked at as A-grade level fighters. Please spare me the bullshit about how Gervonta Tank Davis is facing the best of the best level of competition. Please. When you talk about Rolly Romero, Isaac Pitbull Cruz, you know, Mario Barrios, you know, when you talk about Hector Garcia, you know, other than excuse me, other than Frank Martin, and also other than that of Ryan Garcia, who the fuck is Gervonta Tank Davis fighting that people take a look at that fighter and they say, wow, you know, that dude is super duper dangerous. Like, come on.
were to face any of the other opponents that Naoya Inoue faced.
Because if we're talking about Rolly Romero and Isaac Pitbull Cruz and all these other guys, listen, at the end of the day, this is just my personal view. Luis Neri and Marlon Tapales are probably a little bit better than them. And I mean, if they're not, at least they held belts legitimately, you know, in those things. And they didn't get them just because they were completely vacant.
He would be heavily criticized. Now, while I told you guys that the standard is set so low for non-black fighters, on the opposite end of the spectrum, the standards are set so high for black fighters. How else can you explain the fact that Gervonta Tank Davis will actually get criticized for knocking out Ryan Garcia, Rolly Romero, Frank Martin, while all I know he has to do is just use his Hope insurance and everything is covered?
Right, but who's really criticizing Gervonta Tank Davis for knocking those guys out? I think what you mean overall is that Gervonta Tank Davis might be getting criticized for facing those potential guys. I know what you're talking about. You know, when it comes down to it, and I somewhat agree with you, Mr. DontaesBoxingNation. But once again, let's also keep it real here. This narrative that a lot of these LDBC and new media channels are trying to put out there that Gervonta is facing these elite level opponents, no, he's not. Lamont Roach is not an elite level opponent. Mario Barrios is not an elite level opponent. Hector Garcia, Mario Barrios, Isaac Pitbull Cruz. These guys are not elite level opponents. Rolly Romero certainly is not an elite level opponent. These guys are not elite level opponents. Just stop.
He can fight whoever he wants. It doesn't even matter. Rolly Romero is a bigger fight and a bigger challenge than almost everyone on Inoe's resume.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Rolly Romero, once again, can't box worth a damn. Rolly Romero got his ass completely whooped by Isaac Pitbull Cruz. All right, he couldn't even win a single round against Isaac Pitbull Cruz. He got his ass completely whooped against Isaac Pitbull Cruz. You know, that guy that just recently got outboxed by Jose Valenzuela? You know, the guy that lost to Edwin De Los Santos in the first round, the guy that's never even been a champion before? Yeah, that guy. That's the guy that Isaac Pitbull Cruz lost to. That's who Rolly Romero was able to beat. Please spare me the shit. At the end of the day, I mean, if you're asking me personally, I mean, to be honest with you, TJ Doheny might even be a bigger threat than what Rolly Romero is. And some people may disagree with that, but at least TJ Doheny has some boxing ability. Like, Rolly Romero is very powerful. He's a guy that is very strong, but in terms of his boxing ability is just awful.
Side of Stephen Fulton, of course. You guys have to understand how these race fans operate. Every single time a black fighter wins, it doesn't matter how.
Let me rewind that, actually. Hold on.
Almost everyone on Inoe's resume, outside of Stephen Fulton, of course. You guys have to understand how these race fans operate. Every single time a black fighter wins, it doesn't matter how good the opponent is. They immediately throw the opponent under the bus just to discredit the black fighter for winning.
Right, but you do the exact same thing, sir, with non-black fighters. That's why every time Canelo Alvarez is able to get a victory, even over a fighter that you claim that he was formerly ducking, all of a sudden that fighter is weak, or he's a weak European white boy, or he's a guy that already lost in the past, blah, blah, blah. The thing is about Dante and the LDBC is that they do the exact same shit. They just do it overall once again with different brands of fighters.
And then after that, they go back to praising that.
Once again, that's why it's so ironic that I see a certain amount of these channels, including Dante, stating that, overall, well, Inoue, his resume isn't as good as Gervonta Tank Davis. Whatever you want to say about Inoue, at the end of the day, Inoue has the biggest win out of either of their careers against out of a Stephen Coolboy Fulton. Because Fulton at least would have been on the top 20 pound-for-pound list on many people's lists, including my own. Name me one fighter that would have ever even been close to the top 20 pound-for-pound on Gervonta Tank Davis's resume. You can't name one.
Fighter that lost to the black fighter, like they did with Canelo Alvarez. Now all of a sudden, Canelo Alvarez is great. Let these Mexican fans tell it, who hated Floyd Mayweather. Then they want to defend Canelo by saying, oh, he's just doing everything that Floyd Mayweather did. Okay, so now you're admitting that you guys are racist. Because if two people are doing the same thing, how do you hate the black person for doing it?
And I definitely do agree with that, but this is also the thing that I'm going to state here. When you talk about Inoue and Gervonta Tank Davis, the thing is that their resume, in my view, is a little bit more similar than what some people are trying to admit. But I would even have to give the edge to Inoue, even though I don't think that he has a super extensive or expansive resume. But at least Naoya Inoue has the big fight over Stephen Fulton. At least he beat Marlon Tapales, who was somewhat of a unified champion. Now, that's debatably A- to B+. That's really up to you. It depends on what level you put him there. But to be fair, Marlon Tapales did beat the relatively talented Uzbekistan fighter, MJ, I believe. So I'll give him A-. I'll give him A-. And Louis Neri, even though he's a relatively one-dimensional fighter, I'll give him A- because Neri, I believe, was a bit bigger than Naoya Inoue. And to be fair, other than Brandon Figueroa, he hasn't really lost. And he also did knock out the guy, I believe, within about 5 or 6 rounds that just gave Stephen Fulton hell, where Stephen Fulton had just got out of that fight with a split decision.
Though we know for a fact Canelo Alvarez.
And of course, I'll give him A- for, Nonito Donaire. Even though Donaire was, of course, a little bit older. But to be fair, he had gone on a knockout streak of some undefeated fighters there. So I'll give him that.
He would never.
For Gervonta Tank Davis, I'll give him I'll give him Ryan Garcia. I will give him, what the hell was his name? Frank Martin. And also give him Leo Santa Cruz. I'll give him those 3 names.
Never do the same things that Floyd Mayweather did, because if he even attempted, he would have 5 to 6 losses on his record, and he would be retired by now, most likely. Floyd Mayweather is the only fighter I know that beat 7 fighters that were currently on the pound-for-pound list. And
that definitely is a part of Floyd Mayweather Jr.'s greatness. But to give Canelo Alvarez a certain amount of credit, Canelo Alvarez has fought a lot of great opponents in his career. Now, Dante, of course, he wants to make you believe like Canelo Alvarez is just fighting all these bums. So you can make Canelo Alvarez once again look really, really bad. But at the end of the day, no. Canelo Alvarez has had a great career over a lot of great opponents.
Everybody he fought was coming off of their biggest win. Canelo lost to Bivol, and Bivol offered to come down to 168 for the rematch, and Canelo still turned it down. So no, Canelo ain't doing the same things that Floyd Mayweather did.
Right, and if you're Canelo Alvarez, why the hell do you want to fight Dimitri Bivol at 168? So you can beat him and people can say overall, well, you only beat him because he went down in weight and he was drained. And then if he beats you, it's even worse because, of course, he went down to your weight. So at the end of the day, it's like, why the hell would you want that to happen for? That's a terrible business decision.
He's doing the same things that Gennady Golovkin did. Now, I want to talk about the Floyd Mayweather versus Victor Ortiz fight to give you guys a perfect example of how these race fans stay on code. Leading up to the fight, they'll go on the internet. They'll tell everybody in public, Floyd Mayweather is cherry picking. This is a complete cherry pick. But secretly, when they're at home, all of them will pay for the fight. They're in a packed house with all their...
I agree. Same thing that you do with Mr. Canelo Alvarez, sir. At the end of the day, once again, you notice a lot of the times what they truly think about a certain fighter or a person by how much that they talk about them and how much they're actually trying to tear them down. Dante's Boxing Nation doesn't just tear down Canelo Alvarez because, once again, overall, he's trying to prove a point. He also realizes how great Canelo Alvarez actually is.
Friends, and they're secretly rooting for Victor Ortiz. And when I say rooting for him, they believe he has a chance of winning. The reason why I know this for a fact is because this was at the time when my kids were still boxing and we would be at the gym, and one of the Mexican guys who used to train at the gym, he told me, he said, yeah, man, I went to a fight party to watch that fight between Mayweather and Victor Ortiz. It was an all-Mexican crowd, and he said he goes in there, and he's telling them, he said, yeah, Mayweather gonna win. I'm telling y'all, man, Mayweather gonna win. And, you know, they're sitting over there ignoring him. They don't want to hear it because they're rooting for Victor Ortiz. They're all into the fight rooting for Victor. And this Mexican guy, he's telling me, he's saying, man, they getting happy. They're rooting for Victor Ortiz. They really feel he's going to pull it off. And he continues to tell him, he said, I'm telling y'all, man, I know Ortiz is doing good, but he's going to lose. I'm telling y'all. And then they start getting real mad. They start saying, shut up, man. What are you, some kind of N-word lover? None of those Mexicans in that room was saying, oh, yeah, of course Mayweather is going to win because this is a cherry pick. You see, the moral of the story is they just say out loud, oh, man, Floyd Mayweather cherry picking. See, that's just insurance for them. They say that.
I agree, and it's very similar with you, Mr. Dante's Boxing Nation. Whereas with Canelo Alvarez, every opponent that he picks, no matter what it's going to be, there's always going to be some sort of excuse. For those of you that remember, even when Canelo Alvarez fought that of a Dimitri Bivol, Dante had to come up with some sort of excuse overall and basically said that, oh, well, he's fighting Dimitri Bivol because he's a European fighter, and obviously he thinks that style is easier than Jermell Charlo or something like that, like a black American fighter. Even though any of us that actually know shit about boxing know that Dimitri Bivol is about a couple levels above Jermell Charlo in terms of skill set, if not a few.
Out loud, just in case the...
And also bigger than Jermell Charlo. And Jermell Charlo is not small. Like, Jermell Charlo should be fighting at 168.
Wrong guy wins. Because the truth is, they know that Floyd Mayweather is the Michael Jordan. They know that he is on another level when it comes to all of these fighters. But they can't come out and say Floyd Mayweather is going to win this fight because he's special. But they'll turn around and tell you that Canelo Alvarez is special. They don't want to say out loud that Gervonta Tank Davis is special, but then they want to turn around and they want to praise Ryan Garcia after he gets knocked out by Davis. Posting Mexican flag emojis all in the comment section. It's obvious the reason why they are so inconsistent is because they're basing everything they say on race. They're not...
Agreed, very much like you, sir. Which is why, once again, with certain fighters like Usyk or Fury or Canelo Alvarez or Inoue, you have to put out some sort of insurance. You have to put out, once again, some sort of diminishing factor overall when it comes to those fighters, once again, because you don't want them to be remembered as great fighters. That's why with Usyk, oh, well, he really lost to Dubois. You know, with Fury, oh, well, you know, he cheated against Wilder and, you know, he was never really that good in the first place, blah, blah, blah. You know, he cheats, blah, blah, blah. You know, with Canelo, it's always something. Oh, he's pulling this guy up from this weight class. Oh, that guy already has a loss. Oh, he's old. Oh, he's this. So once again, Dante just uses the same tactics, just with different fighters. And with Inoue, it's also very apparent as well.
Not boxing fans, they're race fans. I mean, once again, just think about this. These fights, like Mayweather versus Victor Ortiz, Gervonta versus Rolly Romero, these fans in particular, they are filling up their homes, throwing fight parties, watching this fight, hoping everybody is cheering for Rolly Romero. Everyone is cheering for Victor Ortiz. You don't do all of that when you feel your guy has no chance and the guy you hate is going to win the fight. I mean, if you're rooting...
But a lot of people really didn't think that Rolly Romero was going to win against Gervonta Tank Davis. I mean, you know, people still throw fight parties because, yes, Gervonta Tank Davis overall, he is an exceptional fighter. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to him, like, dude, come on, let's be for real. And, like, people were still throwing fight parties, for example, for Canelo Alvarez versus Edgar Berlanga. Do you know how many Puerto Ricans were throwing fight parties for that? Does that mean necessarily that overall that Edgar Berlanga still was not a subpar opponent? You know, like, come on.
Against Naoya Inoue, nobody is going to throw a fight party to watch Inoue versus TJ Doheny. or Paul Butler, right? So it's not a coincidence.
Right, but that's more of Inoue's star power in America and worldwide than really what it is the level of opponent. Now, in my personal view, TJ Doheny, no, that's not a fighter in my view that is really that popular. But a lot of that stuff also depends, overall on the quality of the fighter, at least in terms of their star power.
That every single win Gervonta gets, Shakur gets, Devin Haney gets, Floyd Mayweather gets, Terrence Crawford gets, is met with some type of criticism by these non-black fans. While Naoya Inoue can truly fight whoever he wants, and it is met with silence. That's all I got.
With a lot of the boxing fans, I tend to agree with you, Dante, and you do the exact same thing because you are a major racial pro-black fan. So it is what it is. So you're going to do the same shit that they do, just with, once again, your favorite black fighters and the non-black fighters that you have to try to tear down to make it seem like they cannot be remembered as the best of this generation. Anyways, but that pretty much is about it for today.
But now, guys,
I just thought that that was very particularly interesting. That's really about it. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see what happens from here. But once again, Gervonta Tank Davis' next fight is against Lamont Roach Jr. I do not think it's a very good fight, but it is what it is. And of course, Inoue, his next fight's against Sam Goodman. But of course, that fight should be a setup to possibly fight Junto Nakatani. Hopefully, we also get Junto Nakatani versus Takuma Inoue. I believe Inoue's brother, at 118 pounds. And then we'll get to see that fight next year. But we'll see. But anyways, that pretty much is about it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll talk to y'all later.
Next one.